Hello, hello, Terry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good to see you.
Everything works.
Very good to see you. I'm delighted to have been asked by Paul to interview Terry. I'm Stefanie Bolzen. I'm the UK correspondent for Die Welt, a German paper. I used to be Brussels correspondent a long time ago, and basically have been following Brexit also very closely from this side of the channel. And so, yeah, I want to talk to Terry about what the future might bring now that Brexit is a fact. And let me briefly introduce Terry to everyone. So she's a Green MEP. She's also the vice chairwoman of the Green Parliamentary Group in the European Parliament. She was first elected in 2014, then re-elected in 2019. She's a member of the Libe Committee, so the Civil Liberties, Home Affairs, Justice and Home Affairs Committee. And yeah, she studied in Berlin and in Edinburgh. She also went to school in England. So the United Kingdom is very close to her heart. So yeah, fantastic to have you. Bit odd that we are both German and talking English to each other. But anyway, let me ask you with a broader question. Let me start with a broader question to you. In terms of you are a very young politician from the Green Party, and what Brexit means for your generation. Do you think this is something that is now done? There's nothing to change about it, and we have to live with it and make the best of it, or do you think your generation still has a chance to reverse it and somehow bring the United Kingdom back to Europe?
Well, thanks a lot, first of all, Stefanie, for the kind introduction. And I definitely think that Brexit is not done. I think that the slogan in itself was yet another, basically PR stunt, because Brexit is something that is going to follow us definitely for the next years, and especially my generation or younger people. And as you know, in the referendum, we could clearly see that there was a generational divide, that younger people were much likely to vote Remain than older people. And I think that this is also because the younger generation has very often already experienced, since they were born, the advantages that it has to be a member of the European Union. I myself really cannot remember a European Union that has borders, for example, where you would have to be checked. It was always clear to me that if I wanted to, I could live, I could study, I could find a partner from another EU country, and that I would enjoy freedom of movement to go there and live there. And I think that this is something that will definitely have very negative consequences, especially for the younger generation, but basically for everyone, this ending of freedom of movement very specifically. Also, obviously, the economic disadvantages that Brexit is going to bring. And I think that politically, now we have this agreement, or we have these two agreements, but I think that there will be more issues coming up. We already see in the implementation of the withdrawal agreement what a bumpy road it is when you actually have to implement this. And I think it will be very similar for the trade and cooperation agreement. So I think that the debate will continue. And yes, I said in my last speech in the European Parliament before Brexit that I believe that in my lifetime, I'm going to see MEPs from the United Kingdom being re-elected to the European Parliament. And this is certainly something that I still hope to see. I don't think it's going to happen very soon. I don't think, that there is going to be a very easy way back, but I'm a long distance runner. I'm training for a marathon right now. And I also think that, even if it takes a little bit longer, in the end, I hope that we can find our way back together.
Okay, might be a bit of a longer marathon, but let's see. Before I ask you the next question, of course, to everyone in the audience, we can see the chat here, and you are very much welcome. And we would be very happy to get any questions. And the aim is to talk now maybe 15 more minutes, or me interviewing Terry. And then please ask all the questions you would like to ask, and Terry will answer them. So just something like kind of current affairs, which is the 1st of July deadline, which was the deadline until Europeans living in the United Kingdom had to apply for settled status. What is your experience so far with the process? I mean, I must say personally, I found it rather positive. I mean, it was not a nice process to do, but in terms of the bureaucracy, it actually worked quite well. But there are also many other reports of people struggling with this. So what kind of feedback did you get in the European Parliament about this?
I mean, we also received rather mixed feedback. People who said that it was very easy for them, but then also people who had really been living for years in the UK and who were really having difficulties applying then for pre-settled status or for settled status. I think there was also a confusion. I mean, what we can clearly see is that the UK government had definitely underestimated the number of EU citizens that were living in the UK. And this is also where I think a little bit of a worry comes from, that we still don't know if actually all EU citizens that are living in the UK have applied for the status. And now with the deadline passing, we send again as MEPs appeals to the UK government, but also, by the way, to all other EU governments where this could apply to British citizens, to be flexible with these kind of deadlines. And if people have missed it, to still give them possibility to reapply later. Because I think one of the things that we have been very afraid of is that Brexit, mostly in the UK, but maybe to a lesser degree also in the rest of the European Union, will create a hostile environment for people who thought that they would have, you know, a right to residency for the rest of their lives, for migrants coming from the EU or from the UK. And this is really something that I think will also continue to be a challenge, especially with some of the rhetorics that the British government has, you know, come forward with, celebrating freedom and the end of freedom of movement and things like this. So we really hope that in the debate we can also show a little bit again how valuable and enriching EU citizens are to the UK, but also how valuable and enriching, obviously, UK citizens who are moving to the rest of the EU still are, even now that we don't have freedom of movement anymore.
But the fact is that people who have not applied, I mean, there has been yet another grace period given by the Home Office here in the UK, but still, legally, they are now completely at the mercy of the British state. Is that right? And what still can they do if they want to appeal, or if they really end up in a hostile environment? Where can they find help? What can you actually still do for such these people?
I mean, I would first of all definitely say that they should get in contact with the respective citizens' rights associations who have been very active, both trying to find out how legally, how procedurally make things as easy as possible when there were problems, but also who have done a lot of advocacy work, both here in the European Parliament, in national parliaments in the EU, but also in the UK Parliament. And I think that turning to them and asking them how things can still be figured out is definitely useful. Also here in the European Parliament, we have a group of MEPs that have said that also for the future, for issues relating to the United Kingdom, to Brexit, to UK citizens living in the EU, they will still have an open ear. So also if there is something, still see us a little bit as your representatives. Obviously, we will try to then also pull political strings in a sense to support you. And maybe I can just say that, I mean, it looks as, you know, there was a very long period of time now to apply for this, but we have to take into consideration, especially people who might not be online so much, who are living in rural areas, the older generation. And I think for them, having access to this information was much more challenging. And that is why we will continue to really push all governments in the EU, but also the UK government, to be flexible and to still give people the chance also when they apply too late to get a status.
We have seen in recent weeks and months the challenges of both the treaties, the withdrawal agreement, and we are seeing the tension arising from the implementation or the obligation of the British side to implement the Northern Ireland Protocol, and the tension are really they are quite stark here. I mean, I don't know how much you experience that in Brussels, but here, of course, it's very it's quite strong, and it's just been now extended, the grace period of controls between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, but still it's not solved. But you mentioned that you think that it's not only the withdrawal agreement that will put challenges to both sides, but also the trade and cooperation agreement. So where do you see the challenges there?
Well, maybe let me start by saying I think all international agreements have a very important fundament that then the implementation is based on, and that is trust. And I think that over the past years, and I mean, I can speak from the EU side, so to say, from the European Parliament side, we have seen, especially from the Prime Minister, but also some other members of the UK government, that this trust was certainly breached, that, you know, things were said, for example, to the Parliament. I remember Boris Johnson saying that there are not going to be customs checks between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Also then with the question of the actual implementation of the agreement, a lot of difficulties arose. And I think that we have to try to reestablish this trust, because the implementation is just going to be much, much easier if there is actually a common basis that then we can work from and try to find solutions. But, and I have to add this, I mean, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, maybe people are not aware, but this is the first time that such a comprehensive agreement between the EU and a third country has been negotiated in such a short period of time. I mean, in the end, it was around 9 months. It was the starting of the pandemic. Meetings were very difficult, and we can see this in the agreement. I mean, I always said having a deal for the future relations is better than having no deal at all. But we certainly see a lot of shortcomings because of the lack of time in this agreement. It is a very broad agreement in certain sectors. In other sectors, there is basically still a lot of unclarity how things are going to move forward. Just to speak about financial services, but also to speak about, for example, foreign and security policy, where there is nothing in the TCA on. And this is also why basically we are continuing the negotiations in a way on a different basis. But we need to figure out how we will continue to cooperate also in these fields. And even in the fields like, for example, trade and economic relations, where the TCA gives a basis for future cooperation, there's still a lot of open questions because, for example, this rebalancing mechanism that has been introduced, it's a completely new instrument. It has never been used in international trade policy before, and we will have to see on the way how this can actually work. Also, some of the more complicated dispute settlements that are foreseen in the TCA, how will this actually work in practice? And how will this work in practice, again, without, in some respect, having a trust basis between the two partners? And this is why I think that from our side, we really don't only want the European Commission to be in the driving seat, but also to have the Parliament, you know, civil society groups really following the implementation of the TCA, because I think that there is still a lot of work ahead of us to actually then put it in practice and make it work for the better of both sides.
Mm. And from your observation, whether it's in the Parliament or in the Commission or even the Council, because there's, of course, has already been talk about a cross-retaliation if the UK continues to not implement the Northern Ireland Protocol. How much readiness is there really to do this? Because that would also cause a precedent and make relations even worse if actually you start a new relationship with punishing each other.
Well, you know, the problem is a little bit a rules-based multilateralism, which I think is really at the core of what the European Union is about. You need to have a certain level of, then also the consequence of if you are not following an agreed treaty, then there is going to be a reaction to this. I'm not saying that there is any sense of, you know, punishing or, you know, revenge or anything like this in the air in Brussels. But I think that the Commission and also the European Parliament is very ready to again and again say, this is the agreement that we found together. It was a very difficult way to get there, both for the withdrawal agreement as well as for the trade and cooperation agreement. And we need to have this as a basis of our cooperation, because for the European side, also a lot is at stake here. We are not just, you know, one government and one parliament. We are the Commission, the European Parliament, but then you also have 27 member states that sometimes have very different interests in these debates. So I think the Commission is very much bound by what is written in these treaties. They are not as flexible as government, the UK, and this is why this is going to be closely followed. But again, I think if the tone, the negotiations and the tone of how especially the British government is engaging in this dialogue is going to shift, I think there is still a good way of actually findings that are ahead of us.
Thank you. Changing a little bit the topic away from Brexit a little bit, but in November, the United Kingdom is hosting the UN Climate Conference, so the COP26 in Glasgow. And obviously, that's very much an issue that is at the heart of your party. What can you see already now in terms of negotiations, and how optimistic are you that the British Prime Minister will not only make COP26 a domestic success because it's a big event in his country, but also that it might be a success for all of us and contribute to stop global warming? How optimistic are you?
Well, let's see. I still don't want to give up hope because I think, being a member of the Green Party, I believe it is of absolute importance. Our lives literally depend on the success, not only of the COP coming up this year, but of the whole climate protection regime that has been built since the Paris Agreement. And this is why I obviously hope that we can use the discussions in Glasgow, not only to see about where we stand, but also about how can we speed up the procedure. And I think here it's a little bit ironic that this is going to be hosted in the UK this year after Brexit, basically where Brexit has been, if I can say this, a little bit a slap in the face of international cooperation, because, it has very often been argued that we don't want to listen to the ECJ, we don't want to, be bound by commonly agreed rules, something like this. Whereas, the whole COP process really is about, on an international, on a global scale, finding common rules, finding a common basis to work together against climate change. Because one thing is absolutely clear. Climate change is going to affect everyone on Earth, every country, not to the same extent, but there are going to be consequences for all of us. And we can only stop it if we all work together. And I hope that this is really going to be the spirit for the negotiations and for the discussions, side events, for the whole event in November in Glasgow.
And I'm coming already to my last question, because I'm seeing here a couple of questions already in the chat. And again, very happy to get more questions from the audience. Now, speaking more from where I am sitting, and I'm getting these questions, but you are much better placed to answer this. People here are very, very intrigued by the German election on the 26th of September. And there's a good chance that your party will form the next German government, maybe as a senior partner, rather as a junior partner. Let's wait and see. But a Green Party being part of the next German coalition government, what would this mean, in terms of Europe and the UK, but also in terms of Germany and the UK? We saw Angela Merkel was here last week. Now Germany and other EU countries have to form and build up new bilateral relations. What would the Green Party contribute to that?
Well, maybe let me start by saying, I think when you look at the reactions of all democratic parties in Germany on Brexit, like decisions in the UK over the past years, there has not been such a big divergence. So also in questions like how do we react to Brexit? What do we want the Commission to do? I think maybe in some ways, sometimes we have been more pushy as Greens to highlight certain topics, but the general direction, and this is not only something with the government and the Greens, but really across the democratic political spectrum, there was a lot of agreement about where to go with this. I think there was a lot of obviously also sadness that the UK is going to leave the European Union, and that is certainly not going to change if and when and how the Greens enter government this year. I think what might change, and I think I'm not telling you something very surprising here, the Greens in Germany are known to be very pro-European. So what we certainly want to see is in fields like, for example, the fight against climate change, but also other policy fields like foreign and security policy, to have more European cooperation. We make very concrete proposals in our election program also on this. And this is maybe something where a person like Angela Merkel has been more hesitant. She didn't really want to go ahead with proposals. Also, the German government traditionally over the past years has been blocking a lot of new initiatives. And I think we really stand a little bit for bringing a fresh breath into these debates. And then we want to build a Europe that is, made for the next 50 years. And for that, we will need as well institutional as well as political change. And that is why I think, from the tone and maybe from the approach, there is a little bit of a difference. And also, you obviously know that Annalena Baerbock, our candidate for the chancellery, she studied in London, she's very UK-phile. Maybe this is also going to have a positive effect then on the future relations between Germany and the UK, not only because she knows the UK so well, but also because I think for her building this relationship now after Brexit, both with Germany as well as the European Union as a whole, is definitely going to be a priority. It's obviously not going to be the only priority, but I think when I talk to her personally, but also the way that I know her and that I've gotten to know her over the past years, this is really something that we share, and we have always shared that the UK is very close to our hearts, and I think that this is also going to be reflected then if the Greens get into government.
That's true, but if on the one hand, there's a lot of Anglophiles in the Green parties because of life experience and having studied in the UK, but at the same time, if the Greens are driving more European integration, that will be something that, at least for now, the British governments will not be very interested in to get any closer to Europe.
Absolutely, that's absolutely true. But at the same time, now this conflict maybe is not even going to be that frictionless, because this was always one of the issues in the council, when the UK was sitting there basically blocking any kind of further integration, whereas now, being a third country, there is no really direct influence that the UK has anymore on these processes. We also have to be honest about this. The UK is not sitting around the table here anymore. We don't have MEPs from the UK anymore in the European Parliament. So in that sense, I think that might not create so much friction anymore. Whereas the question now, how can we make the withdrawal agreement work? How can we make the TCA work? And how can we also build a new relationship? How can we, and this is something that I'm always asking myself, I became so Anglophile also because of the fact that I did my Erasmus in the UK. And how can we continue to build these kind of bridges between Germany and the UK, but also between the EU and the UK, now that the UK is not part of the Erasmus program anymore? And all of these questions are certainly going to come up in the next years. And I can tell you that, in the Green Party, and I would say in general also across the democratic political landscape in Germany, there is a lot of openness of really filling this relationship with a lot of life.
Yeah, I agree. I agree very much. Okay, I'm going to open the chat and I just start with the first question. I read it out to you. Is that okay?
Yes.
It's from Martin Lee, Senior Technologist, Sky UK. The MEP, so you, Terry, correctly says that there was a generational divide in the UK referendum outcome, notwithstanding the fact that there were many other issues that divided the voting patterns. Does she not think that younger people might change their minds as they grow up?
Well, that's always the question. Will the change of maybe also living conditions have an impact on voting behavior, but also on political attitudes? Certainly it will, but I think that there will still be this kind of memory and notion of a generation that grew up and that always lived, and maybe also taking it a little bit for granted inside of an EU that was granting freedom of movement to them, for example. And if you ask me, I believe that Brexit is going to have negative consequences, a lot of negative consequences for the UK, also for the European Union. And this is why I think that this generation will also grow up with facing these consequences. And then I hope that eventually, on the basis of these experiences, again, not in 5 years, longer period of time, realize how many advantages it actually had to be a part of the European Union, and then hopefully get a taste and appetite for rejoining at some point. It happened. For me, we still have to see how we can build links, but with the population in the UK as a whole. And I think this is what we are trying to do here in the European Parliament, and what we are obviously also trying to encourage on the UK side.
Mm-hmm. The next question comes from Yvonne Esterhazy, UK correspondent for German Business News. That's a very good question, because it puts, we're talking a lot about Europeans in the UK, but we should really also be talking about British citizens on the continent. And she says, many people complain about the process of acquiring settled status in the UK, but how about the Brits who are long-term residents in one of the 27 EU countries? Okay, they can stay in the country of residency, but they are losing freedom of movement in the rest of the EU. Is that fair? Many of these Brits feel very European and could not even vote in the 2016 referendum. So I think it's a very, very good question, because, they didn't have a say in this, and they are now suffering the consequences of being kind of stuck in one EU country.
I mean, I can make it very short. It is not fair. It's one of the very, very negative consequences that Brexit is having. And again, we were discussing here in the European Parliament, and then the withdrawal agreement was found, and I voted in favor of the withdrawal agreement. And then the TCA was agreed on, and I voted in favor of that as well. But always knowing that the project that is behind it, and that is Brexit, and that is something that the members of the European Parliament, we cannot change. That is something that means that millions of people are going to lose rights. And the most affected are obviously people who, in the very, very big majority, did not vote for this result. But still, it is something that from the European Parliament, we could support the pro-European citizens movements in the UK. We could address these issues here. We could work towards having citizens' rights of UK citizens in the rest of the European Union being as much as possible taken into consideration. But the fact that Brexit is going to happen, and that it's going to have massive negative consequences for millions of people, that is just something that we could not, and we still cannot change. So I think what we will do definitely, and this is more in the hands of the member states, but what we still do from the European Parliament is to advocate also there for having flexible arrangements. Like, for example, one of the things that we are asking for as Greens in Germany is to give voting rights, at least on the local level, also to people who don't have an EU citizenship, so that they can stay a little bit more politically engaged, because we know, obviously, for UK citizens, this is also a very, very big issue right now. But the fact that it does have these bad and unfair consequences, that's something that we cannot change.
Although I'm just thinking about this, but if these British citizens acquire the nationality or the passport in the country of their residency, then they regain freedom of movement, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Mm. Then they have an EU citizenship again. And this is also why, for example, in my home state in Germany, North Rhine-Westphalia, there is traditionally a very big British community because of historical links. And the government, but also the government on the federal level, but also the regional government encouraged British citizens not only to apply, to get a status and a residency, but also then to say, look, if you have been living here for this amount of time, why don't you think about applying for citizenship? even though I think in some cases that's possible, I think in some cases it's also really, really challenging. So I can see that for some people, this is not really an option to follow up on.
Yeah, it also depends whether you can legally have double citizenship. I mean, I've gone through the process, so I know how complex it is. But let's go on to the next question from Rita Giannini Watson, Director of Badshot Limited Policy Advisors in Brussels. Family associations in the UK calculate that there are at least 2,500 children in care in the UK for whom settled or pre-settled status has not been asked by local authorities or guardians. In the TCA, there are no provisions for civil and family legal cooperation. Could the Parliament take some initiative on this? This is a big issue here about children being left in a limbo situation.
Apps where there probably will be further questions arising in the future. This is what I was trying to say. So if you want to send some more information, and then we can try how maybe we can address the Commission to this, or also address the member states about this, because indeed this will be one of the issues that we will continue from the side of the European Parliament to try to raise. But obviously, we will also need, I would encourage then also to have in the UK the relevant, political actors, also civil society actors look into this, because that's obviously really important for us, that we always have this sort of double approach, double perspective on issues like this. And I mean, we have not spoken about it now, but this group of MEPs, this EU-UK friendship group that we have founded, that's one of the platforms that we are trying to use also to have meetings with our UK counterparts, to say, look, is there an issue with regards to citizens' rights or other issues that has popped up in your parliamentary work? Maybe this pops up also here. How can we make this easier for the people affected? But also now we are going to have a UK delegation in the European Parliament, as the UK is now a third country, just going to be a new experience. And there are also issues like this will definitely be on the agenda. So if you could send me further information, then I can try to see how we can bring it up in the parliamentary proceedings here.
Okay, and I think also looking at the time, I'm coming already to the last question. I'm trying to put these two together. They're both from Sandra Kaduri. She's asking whether you're worried about the new far-right alliance in the European Parliament, including parties such as Le Pen, Orban, Salvini and others. How can the spread of the anti-EU views be managed, as well as ongoing disinformation and polarizing culture wars? And I think we should try to connect it back to the UK. Sandra is then asking, can the UK be connected with, I guess it's integrated or involved with this in fighting disinformation spread by these far-right groups? We have also heard that we can expect a lot of disinformation on climate change as these policies advance. So it's quite a broad question, but what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, first of all, maybe on this far right sort of like new grouping, this is so far only materializing, but it's happening on a party level. So these parties are doing it. It didn't have an effect inside of the European Parliament. So we still have two right-wing nationalist groups here in the European Parliament. I think they're now trying to set a little bit the scene and then see for the midterm, which is coming at the end of the year, when things are going to be rearranged in the European Parliament, what they're going to do. I think it hasn't had the best start, because already the first parties are dropping out again, because you would not believe, but the far right also has a lot of disagreements. For example, when it comes to the EU relation to Russia or what is happening in Belarus, there are a lot of potential conflicts that we can already see right now. So let's see if this is actually going to happen. But what you are absolutely right about, for sure, is that we will have to stand up to this, be it here in the European Parliament or also in a broader public discourse. I mean, so far, at least in the European Parliament, the cordon sanitaire has worked. So we say that we are not cooperating with far-right anti-democratic movements. But obviously, we will see how this is going to continue if they really manage to form a much bigger group, and then how the reaction, for example, from the EPP, so the center-right group here in the European Parliament, is going to be. I think there are interesting discussions ahead of us in the future. But obviously, our response also has to be in a broader political spectrum. And I think we have to do both. On the one hand, we certainly have to very clearly stand up to the narratives that they're pushing forward. I mean, the last thing that you have probably followed a little bit is this anti-LGBTI narrative agenda that especially Viktor Orban, but not only him, are pushing with anti-LGBTI laws, with changing in the constitution. This is really something that they're trying to push. And I think we have to make absolutely clear that this is not in line with the values of the European Union, with fundamental rights, also with the European Convention on Human Rights. So really to say no passerán there. On the other hand, I think it's also important to have a positive narrative, because we see if, we are only trying to engage in debates that they are setting, this is not really leading anywhere. So to try to have positive narratives on where we can work together and why European cooperation actually makes sense. And I think that this whole question of how do we tackle climate change is there, because there we can very clearly say there are mutual benefits for all sides to work together also on a European Union level now, with the legislation on the European Green Deal coming up, a lot of other issues that we will have to address over the coming years. It's just one example, but this, I think, we have to push for and not let them kind of set the stage and also only follow their agenda, but also really to set a positive pro-European agenda from our side. And if I may say this, because I think that if there is one thing that we can learn from the Brexit referendum, and, I'm one of the few EU politicians that actually went to the UK and was part of the campaign. I did events, I was trying to engage with people. First of all, what really struck me back then is that Northern Ireland really didn't play a very substantive role in the public discourse, I found. In Germany, it was much bigger, the question of how do you solve the Northern Ireland problem. That was one of the major discussions, whereas I went to the UK and people didn't really seem to care that much, at least some people, not everyone, but some people. And the second thing I wanted to say is that I had the feeling that in this referendum, there was this Remain campaign, which was very good with giving you the numbers and the economic data, why it is beneficial for the UK to be part of the European Union. There was a very rational argument behind it, which is absolutely true and absolutely necessary in, democratic debates. Well, at the same time, I think we also need to add another aspect, and that was really, I think, the stronghold of the Leave campaign, to make an emotionally appealing argument. This take back control, this sense of we need to be free from the European Union. That was an argument that was mostly based on something very emotional, not so much on an actual factual, argumentation, but it worked. And I think that for pro-Europeans, the lesson that we have to learn is that just selling the EU as an economic bloc, that, it's going to have positive effects for you in the long run to be part of it, that's important, but it cannot be everything. And this is really what I hope that for the next years, with the whole debate and the conference on the future of Europe, we will keep this in mind. And sorry for being a little bit long, but there's just so much to say about this.
No, I think we're all right. There's still 2 minutes to go, but I think we need to wrap up now. Thank you so much, Terry. Vielen Dank. And I really look forward to the pandemic now hopefully coming to an end, not only because then we can meet in person again, but also because then the reporting in the British press will maybe focus on Brexit a bit more again, and then we can more clearly see what are actually the consequences of Brexit, because that has been completely underreported because of the pandemic. So it's an exciting and interesting year ahead as ever. And thank you very much. And I guess we will now disappear at some point.
Thank you so much. And yes, I also hope that we all can meet in person again very soon.
Yes, that would be nice.